right, well, we're going to talk mobile phones at 9 minutes past 6. Look, it is 2022, and there are some big questions that we need to think about, like, we should be able to do lots of things by 2022. Why are phones still not waterproof? They're not really, are they? Some of them claim to be. I wonder, have you had a little incident with your phone that you might want to share with me? Have you dropped it in the dreaded where, or have you, had it a bit wet and you haven't been able to fix it? What happens when your phone does get wet? You got to be careful. 1338 882 is the talkback number. There's been a recent case where Samsung was fined in Australia $14 million. This happened just last week over false representations in ads about the water resistance of the Galaxy phones. That's the Samsung case. There was another one a couple of years ago involving Apple. So what happens with these? What's the difference? You hear water resistant and you hear waterproof. Let's talk about it in terms of phones. Dr. Ritesh Chugh is on the line. He's an associate professor, information and communications technology at Central Queensland University. Ritesh, good morning.
Good morning, Mark.
What is the difference here, and what are phone companies in particular sort of obliged to do when it comes to this kind of waterproof versus water resistant?
So firstly, it's important to understand the difference between water resistance and a complete waterproof device. Water resistant product can usually resist some level of water penetration, whereas a totally waterproof phone is impervious to water, which means it should not accept any water affecting the device. Now, that's the reason why Apple and Samsung have both got into trouble with governments in Australia and Italy, because they were advertising their phones as waterproof. Now, the phones weren't waterproof. They were water resistant to a certain level. Now, that's the biggest problem. And you were talking of the obligations of these phone manufacturers. Unfortunately, they just wash their hand away when it comes to warranty affecting the device through liquid damage. In fact, none of those companies will fix your phone if it is liquid damaged.
Right. But hang on, so what if they do claim, though, that there is water resistance at the very least? Wouldn't they then have to follow through?
Water resistance, again, in most of Apple's devices is not covered. Samsung doesn't cover them at all. And even when it comes to water resistance, there is difference in the standards that they specify. For example, Samsung's latest phones, let's say the S22, says that the phone is water resistant to a depth of 1.5 meters for up to 30 minutes, whereas Apple, who has got the same certification, so there is actually a certification that's called IP68, and both Samsung and Apple's latest phones have a certification of IP68. Now, the difference is Samsung says our phone can last for 30 minutes in a depth of 1.5 meters, whereas Apple, with the same rating, says that their phone can last for 30 minutes to a maximum depth of 6 meters. So you see, it gets confusing here for users.
Hang on, how much of that is true, do you think?
Look, there have been lab tests done, and the phones usually last for about 30 minutes. Right. But that is under lab-controlled conditions.
Right.
Now, when we use our phones, we aren't using them in lab-controlled conditions. When we are using our phones, we use them in real-life scenarios, such as swimming or snorkeling or boating, where, there are different factors that affect the water resistance or waterproofing. Because, when we are swimming, the speed is different, the movement is different, the water pressure is different.
But hold on a minute, Ritesh. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just thinking, surely when people, I want to hear from our listeners, 1338 882, what's your experience? Because I thought if you just simply dropped it in the toilet, just for a matter of seconds even, or a minute or whatever, I thought that was it for your phone. Are you saying that they should be able to survive that?
Yes, they should be able to survive. Latest phones. See, again, it's not every phone. Right. So what I would advise your listeners is to check for the IP rating of their phone. There is an IP rating. Now, the question, my advice again, sorry, Mark, should people necessarily be going swimming with their phones? I would advise against it because of the different elements which are, like I said, testing is under lab-controlled conditions.
Yeah.
But if it falls, so for example, you're at the pub and you spill a glass of beer over it.
Yeah.
Well, I doubt something will happen to your phone.
All right. I'm going to put it over to our listeners. We're getting some calls coming in. I really appreciate your time this morning. Dr. Ritesh Chugh there from the Central Queensland University. What's your experience? I would have thought we could sort this out by now. They would have been more waterproof in 2022. But what's your experience? 133